a psalm here. I'll tell everybody so they can go. If you go to the posts, if you're looking at me right now on YouTube, you can go to the post section and you will find the images we are going to study today, which I will also be drawing out on the board, quite possibly. And if anybody wants to follow along that way, they can go and do that. They're also on Facebook, so we have a Facebook page. All that stuff's available there. So anybody who wants to follow along with the study tonight, as we're going to get into it on the Sabbath, the discussion of Israel's Sabbath, you can do that. So I'll give you some time to get to it if you're not singing along with us. So Psalm 30, the two. All right, so we did not get through all of 17 then, right? The last question in that sheet. I ended it there for this week's discussion. We have the discussion of Pentecost and all of that. So we're on question 17, 17Q, XVII is Roman numeral 17, XVII. And we'll go through this, and then I will utilize some of this if we can, this guy here. There are two sides of this discussion which we're going to be having about the Sabbath. So we're just doing information on the Sabbath for everybody here, as well as those listening abroad. A lot of people have questions about why we believe in the lunar Sabbath, or why we support that idea as the true Sabbath. And so we're going to be discussing that. I had a really good discussion, which is what this is from, actually, on the internet. So I was pretty wiped out this week. It was a long week for me, a lot of work this week. But in the evenings, I come home and I check my social media stuff, and there's conversation going on, and people asking questions, and people telling me their thoughts and stuff like that. And so this first half of this diagram actually came from a conversation with a friend of mine in Romania. And I'm hoping he's watching tonight, or evening or morning or whatever time it is where he's at. And this is the calendar that was being talked about as being the proper Israelite calendar. And I said, well, that's not right, and here's why. And then I created this based off of what they already did. I just took it and I adjusted it. And then this will help with some of the questions we had last Sabbath on the new moon about the 6 working days. And I'm hoping to cover that as too. Brother Kenny brought up this question that he said he fields from people pretty often. And so this diagram will help with that, where it's titled New Moon. And so that is somewhat covered in the Feasts of the Lord discussion here. And we'll try to finish this up first, and then we will get to that. So question 17 on our Catechism says, are the feasts of the Lord, which shall be proclaimed to be holy convocations, that's a quote from Leviticus 23, everybody should recognize it, the same as the seventh-day Sabbaths of the week? So this was the exact response I gave to this double. Now anyone using YouTube, I had to split these up because they wouldn't let me load it up this big, so I gave you a 1 and a 2. You'll have to bounce back and forth or print them off or something. But the question corresponds to this, so it worked out really neatly and nicely that I had a discussion about this where I created this week and sent this to a friend of mine who I was having the discussion with, and then our last question, we'll start talking about that and that, and so I was able to use that. So very good timing. Are the feasts of the Lord, now you remember the word feasts is the word moedim. It is the same as seasons, as used in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, for signs, seasons, days, and years, can correspond back to it. Psalm 104, verse 19 says, God made the moon for seasons. That's the same word, moedim, for feasts. You could translate it that way. And so when the question is being asked, are the feasts of the Lord, which shall be proclaimed as holy convocations, the same as the seventh-day Sabbath of the week? The answer is yes. So if you remember the very first feast mentioned in Leviticus chapter 23 was the Sabbath, the seventh day, and after 6 working days, and it specifies that clearly in the first 3 chapters of Leviticus 23. It says, according to Leviticus 23, 2 through 3, the weekly Sabbath is the first feast and holy convocation to be remembered in correspondence to the festival system. That's important. The festival system of Israel is the key understanding of how the Sabbath system worked. In other words, we are given specific dates of the Sabbath in the Bible. And those specific dates, calendar dates, monthly dates, not weekly dates. We know it's the seventh day. That's just the way it's referred to. We know it's a Sabbath. That's the title it has. But we're talking about calendar dates, monthly dates. And so when we look at the feasts, there is a way in which we can look at it and we can see those numbers of the month, and then build a picture of how the moon, which is what guides the months, the new moon, corresponds to the Sabbaths and the new moons, and how that works together. So that we have a united, joined calendar system that's going to be the Sabbath calendar, so to speak. The Sabbath, the fourth commandment, is the governing commandment over time. Okay? So when you ask the question of how should we worship God, the Sabbath is going to obviously be the answer. It's going to be a holy convocation. And that is the word used in Leviticus 23. Convocation is a really special word. In the Hebrew and the Greek, both means basically an assembly of people coming together for worship or for some purpose. And so when we talk about convocation in the English, it's even neater. It's even more neat. I don't know which one's right. Neater, more neat, something. One of the two. It's one of those. And this is why it's neat. You have the word con, right? Which basically means together, to bring something together. And then you have vocate, convocate, right? And to convocate, we think of the word vocation two different ways in English. A vocation can be something you do for work. You say, my vocation is to be a carpenter. My vocation is to be a landscaper. My vocation is to be, a keeper of the home. Or whatever your vocation, your calling. But see, the word vocation is a Christian worldview. Your work is your vocation because it's your calling. And so the word vocate, you can hear the word voke in there, like invoke or vocal. It's for calling. So people believe they were called by God to be a carpenter. They were called by God to be a landscaper. They were called by God to do their work. So it's the way we speak in English is built, and in Latin actually, is built upon a Christian worldview. So when we talk about convocating, we're literally talking about not coming together to do work. That's cool too, on the 6 working days. But on the Sabbath, we come together to vocalize with one another. So why do we pray together, sing together? Why do you hear preaching of the Word of God? Why do we read the Bible together? Because we're commanded to on the Sabbath day. And so Leviticus 23 talks about the Sabbaths being holy convocations, times of coming together in assembly to speak with one another, to hear the word, right? Faith comes by hearing, hearing comes by the word of God. That's why we hear a preacher. This is the reason why we do what we do. It's all biblical. It's based on the Bible. And so these are times where God says are allotted for that thing. It's not something man made up, going to church. Matter of fact, the word going to church and convocation are actually synonyms. So the concept of coming together into the church is the calling of the assembly, right? Church is from the Greek word ekklesia, right? That means to be called out, right? So klesis is the word for call, or kaleo, and those words are referring to calling something. And here we are calling people out of the world into the holy convocation. And that's how the church is built. So, according to Leviticus 23, 2-3, the weekly Sabbath is the first feast. It is a feast day. It's an appointed time. Remember, there were those two words we looked at, moed and chag. We're not talking about a chag. The chag is the bigger festival. The chag is the week-long festival or the multiple-day festival. We diagrammed that last week. We are talking about the moed, moedims, or moedi, the feasts of the Lord. Okay, and so in talking about those things, we're saying there's an appointed special time for church. That's what we're saying. And it's on the Sabbath day. And the Sabbath is the first appointed special time, feast, season, whatever you want to call it, whatever word you want to use, for church, for holy convocation. And those things are based upon a time of remembrance that are interwoven into the festival system. So when we have the first month and the 7th month that are giving us specific calendar dates, 15th day and the 22nd day of the month. Those are 8 days apart. Those land on 7th days. The first day is a 7th day, and the very last day of the festival, the 22nd, is a 7th day. And I mean that in the weekly sense. But in the monthly sense, it's the 15th and the 22nd, or the 21st at evening and the 14th at evening, depending on when you start counting. Those are pinpointed specifics about when Sabbaths happen. And the question would then be, how do they happen both months on those calendar dates? Unless the new moon is being used to make that happen. So that the moon is the timepiece that actually governs those seasons. Psalm 104:19. The moon was made for seasons. So that is the key indicator for it. And that's what's being talked about. So here's what it says. Speak to the children of Israel and say unto them concerning the feasts, that's the Moeds, okay, Moedim, of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim. Now this is interesting. Somebody must make the proclamation. This is the reason why a lot of people who believe in lunar Sabbath, they're all over the place. They keep this day and that person keeps that day. This guy keeps this new moon and that guy keeps this new moon. There must be, in order to have a church, you have to have eldership. You have to have some kind of ministry. Someone in charge, there should be many, in charge of proclaiming the Holy Convocation. So this tells us that there is human interaction with God's law and the heavens to make a proclamation. Okay? Speak to the children of Israel and say to them concerning the feasts, the appointed times of the Lord, the seasons of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. These are the times you get together and convoke together. Even these are my feasts. These are my seasons. These are my appointed times. God's appointed time, not ours. We don't get the choice. We get the choice to interpret the law. Right? Churches interpret the law. That's all we're allowed to do. We're not allowed to make law. Any church, like the Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox or any other church that claims they have the right to create law, you need to avoid them. Because that's not what God has ordained. God has ordained interpreters of the law, judges, those who can judge and interpret and say, this is how we're going to worship. But they don't have the right to create days of worship, like Jeroboam. That was his great sin, remember? He created a day devised of his own heart. He made it up. Well, that's what people still do today. That's what churches did a long time ago, and they're still doing it today. That's what the Romanists do. These are my feasts. God claims them as his own. We don't have the right to invent feasts as we want. Here's what he says. Look, he always mentions this. Here's the positive command. What's the positive command? 6 days shall work be done. That's a shall commandment. And it's important. And the reason it's important is because society based on Sabbaths will be lazy. Society based on work will be strong. In order to deserve a day of rest, you need to work 6 days in some capacity. You need to be a productive people. So every time the commandment is ever mentioned in the Bible, any time other than just like in passing when it says like it was the Sabbath or something like in the days of Jesus, right? It always in all of the commandments also brings about the positive command. Even in festival law, which we'll probably look at in this series. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. You see, it has to be those things. So some people, have you ever heard someone say, nothing in the Bible says I got to go to church on the Sabbath. It's about rest. I get to sleep in, sit in my underwear, and watch cartoons. You know, that kind of mentality, right? And there are people like, I get to play video games. That's what I do on the Sabbath. That's how I rest. Listen, the Sabbath is made for you to go convocate. The Sabbath is made for you to worship God. The reason you're given a day off of work by commandment, God commands it, is so that you worship God. So that you remember he's the God of creation and the God of salvation. You remember we covered that in the very first part of this Roman numeral 1 of the Catechism. These are the very first things we were dealing with. So 6 days you work. The seventh day is a Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation, a time to go to church, a time to come together and vocate. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of Yahweh in all of your dwellings. So the first feast, the first festivity is the Sabbath day. So when somebody says, well, all of the calendar Sabbaths, like Unleavened-Bread and Tabernacles and Pentecost, right, and the seventh new moon, the memorial trumpets, those are festival Sabbaths. Nobody will disagree because they're called Sabbaths directly in the Scripture. But what they'll say is the weekly Sabbath is different. It's just a 7-day rotation. Here's the problem. Genesis chapter 1:14 said that the lights in heaven were for signs, seasons, that's Moedim, appointed times, for signs, seasons, days, and years. That's Genesis 1. That's organic law. That's the foundation piece. And then when you read Psalm 104:19 again, it says the moon was made for seasons. If the Sabbath is a season or a feast, and the moon was made for seasons or feasts, then the Sabbath is appointed by the moon too. It's just kind of a common sense reading of the text. I know it challenges the way we do things in Western society, and it challenges the way, honestly, you do things anywhere in the world, because we have so long drifted away from just the heavenly reckoning of time. Here's the continuation. It says, as it is naturally the case, when the new moon is remembered. Now, all these words are used for a reason. When we talk about the new moon being remembered, right, we're hearkening back to Numbers 10:10, right? That it was to be a time of memorial. It was to be a time of remembrance. We're hearkening back to Leviticus 23 when it tells us to keep the memorial of trumpets. It's a memorial. It's a remembrance time. The same language of remembrance and memorial is used for the new moon as is used for the Sabbath. And I told you that men are the ones who are commanded by that poetic language to be the rememberers, because their name means to be a rememberer. That is what a Zakur is. That is what a male is in Hebrew. He is the rememberer of his faith for his household. He is charged with that duty. It's God's will that the man do that through hell or high water. The Sabbath, as remembered by the new moon, aligns the natural correspondence. I'm sorry, I skipped down. I'm reading the wrong part. You go back up. All right. As it is naturally the case when the new moon is remembered, so you see the second paragraph in 1, according to the fourth commandment, as the Sabbath of every month, and called a festival, Psalm 81:2, the new moon is called a chag. Different word, not moed. I'm sorry, this is confusing, but if I would have wrote the King James Bible, I would have chose different language. Read the Young's literal translation, for instance, and you will see how some translators have translated these things properly. Called a festival, Psalm 81:2, which is reckoned as the first day of the month. This reckoning of the new moon causes the first of the 6 working days, 6 days shalt thou work, to occur on the second day of the month, every month, which after the commanded intervals of 6 working days. Start looking at your sheet right now. See what it says? These second row down here, these are the monthly dates. The 23rd of the month, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the new moon's right there in the center. Okay? All right? So if you have this, check it out. The second row of numbers that we have here are the monthly numbers. The top row are the days of the week. See, days of the week. Days of the week. Okay? These are the 6 working days. So, what we are seeing is the second day. This is what's being specified in the Catechism. The second day of the calendar month is the first day of the week. Now, you could say it's the first day at evening, or the second day at evening, if you want to talk about it. But there's only a few places in the Bible that type of language is used. Okay, Passover is one of them. The 14th at evening, right? And the 21st at evening. That's where you'll find that language. But these are the working days. It's the first day of the week, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, and seventh is always the Sabbath. But in the monthly lineup, it's going to follow a different pattern. It's one day off. Okay? It's just one day off. Why? Because the new moon is sabbatical. And so it offsets it, and that exactly aligns us up with what you'd find on the other side. Where you see Passover's 15th day, the first day of unleavened bread, which is a commanded Sabbath, is the second week of the first month. Second week of the first month, it's the 15th day of the month, and it's always commanded to be a Sabbath from the 14th at evening unto the 21st at evening. Okay? That means the 15th and the 22nd day of the first and the 7th month are commanded Sabbaths. And if they are commanded Sabbaths, the reason they are not, for instance, counting by 7, which I've seen people do that before mistakenly. You just count by 7. You know, everybody knows how to count by 7, right? 7, 14, 21, 28. You're just counting by 7, just like you count by 5, 5, 10, 15, 20, right? Well, counting by 7, people would go, well, that's easy. You know, it's the 7th day, 14th day, 21st, right? 28th. Those are counting by 7s, but we're offset just by 1. So instead, we're counting, as you'll see in the Catechism, This is being explained. According to the fourth commandment, at the end of evening of the 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, at the end of the night, like right now, as it's happening right now, we are right now passing into the 23rd day, right here. We are leaving the last Sabbath tonight, right now, as evening, as the sun is going down, darkness is coming upon us, and we are entering into the first working day. And after this message today, after Bible study, it won't be the Sabbath. It will be the first working day. You could technically go to work tonight if you wanted to, and you wouldn't break the Sabbath. Most of us won't. Most of us are going to go to bed, wake up in the morning, and go to work, right? But technically speaking, when that sun has entered past evening, when that mixture, the word evening is the word Arab, just like Arab people who are mixed, like a mongrel race, that's what your Strong's Concordance will say. It's mixing light with darkness, right? And so as light mixes with darkness, and darkness is overtaking light right now in the evening, that day is ending, and a new day has arisen. When one thing ends, the next arises. And so this is why there's two types of counting found in the Bible. Sometimes when you read in Exodus chapter 12, you will see it will say at the 14th that evening, unto the 21st that evening. It's counting, looking at just this portion, right? Just about now, actually, as neat as that is a good example. Right as that time is ending, you have 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, right before the Sabbath overtakes it. It's the day of every month, and it starts the start of the weekly Sabbath, which will occur, the daylight portions, total night, 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th. And that's going to be every month. It will never change. So if you understand what I'm trying to tell you, every month, the 1st, the 8th, okay, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th are Sabbaths. And if there's a 30th day month, it is included into the New Moon Festival, which is why you'll see our little diagram with the diagonal line. It's not, we don't always have a 30th day. The Chag, the festival, is sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, depending on how God has dictated that month to occur. That's God's doing, not mine. Does that make sense so far? Are we following along? Is there any questions that you could have, even for your friends? I'm asking for a friend.
The only question I have is, what calendar is this on this sheet?
We'll get into that later, okay? You're going to just make a mess of things.
I haven't seen every calendar.
Me too.
I know I did. I should have. So, all right. Well, let's just move on. Did you say you have something?
No, I was saying the same thing I was.
Second, this is the second answer for that 17th question. The Sabbath, as remembered by the new moon, aligns by a natural correspondence. The 14th at even, that's King James for evening, by the way, 14th at even, followed by the 15th day of the first month, so talking about the first day of unleavened bread, which is commanded as a day of holy convocation, no servile labor, in keeping of the day of Yahweh's Passover. Okay? And of the first day after that evening, to be remembered as the festival of unleavened bread. So here's what's being described. Okay? I'll use the board a little bit here. Here's what's being described right now. We find that the 14th is Passover. Pashka. Okay? And since the 14th is Passover, and it's commanded by God to be a day of work. You kill a lamb, right? The people had to prepare everything, right? But at evening, as we say eve, right? It's then going to turn into the 15th. And this 15th is commanded to be a what? Sabbath. And it is also the first day of what? Of what Chag? What festival? Of unleavened bread. I'll just put UB, unleavened bread. Okay? So here's what's being described. At this evening time, it blends over and turns into this. This is the Sabbath. Not pending that Passover is a Sabbath. Passover is not a Sabbath. Passover is a working day. It's the 6th day of the week. Always. It's always the 6th day of the week. Every single year. And so if you ever wondered how we got to where we are right now, and people will say, well, you know, Christ died on Sunday. Now we remember that forever. Okay, well, number one, the days of the week have nothing to do with the biblical calendar. There was no Sunday or Saturday in Jesus' day. There was no Friday. That's a pagan goddess from Norse mythology. So that should be common sense. You could kind of sort of say, well, maybe the Romans had their influence in things, right? Saturday and Sunday, Saturn's day. That's a Roman thing. But the problem is all those other days that we've memorized, you know, from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, those are all pagan gods. From Norse mythology. Okay? From Germanic paganism. Why do we even have them in our dialect anymore? They should have got wiped out and eradicated. But they didn't. So they're with us today, and I'm glad they're there because it proves that the calendar system that people are using is not biblical. Okay? It is not based on the scriptures. So when people tell you, though, Christ died on Friday, which was Passover, and he Sabbathed in the grave on Saturday, which was the Sabbath, and he rose from the dead on Sunday, they are correct if you just get rid of that pagan language. He died on Passover, which was the 6th day. He Sabbathed in the grave, which was the first day of Unleavened Bread. So this would have been the 6th day of the week, right? Here we go. 6th day. 7th day. Right? And then we're back to the first day. Right? But this would make it the 16th. And would be the first working day. This would be the day that Christ rose.
Yeah, it makes sense that he rose on a working day. He didn't decide a Sabbath on the non-Sabbath day and turn the working day into Sabbath.
Right.
That he
So
rose on.
Passover was the day that he was crucified. Put a cross there. Right? Christ was crucified on the cross. Right? This is the day that we all think of the tomb like this with a little stone there, right? He's in the grave. For the tomb. Right? And here, he rises. So what happened sometime a long time ago is that this got crystallized. Rather than looking at this as Passover's commemoration, that this happens at Passover time, they say, well, we're going to remember this every week. Sounds like a fun idea. Problem is, it's not in the Bible. So rather than trying to keep it throughout the week, it turned into why that people take communion every week and why things like that happen and stuff. This is a specific pattern of what you see for Passover. 14th day, Passover day. 15th day, Sabbath of Unleavened Bread. 16th day, working day. This is also called the wave sheaf day in the Bible. This is the day where the priests wave the sheaf before the Lord of the first barley ripened crop, which somebody took it down. There it is. Don't pan over here. So I have this from. We keep this here right here on the windowsill. This is actually the wave sheaf that we cut and used it for our lesson for that day last year. And so, pretty neat. So, this was also the wave sheaf. Now I'm getting off topic a little bit, but we'll get back into this topic as we go here. I'm trying to blend these two things together. I hope it's panning out. Any questions so far? Without the new moon being a Sabbath, by the way, or a non-working day, which we already established that's the case in Ezekiel 46, right? Remember, there were 6 days of work, but on the Sabbath and new moon, the gates were open, so they were not working days. We used our great deductive reasoning. And in doing that, we established there are 6 working days, and the new moon's not one of them, and neither is the Sabbath. Therefore, they must somehow be united. Well, how are they united? Back to that diagram here. There's the 7th day. intimately connected to the new moon, whether it's 2 days or 1 day, whether it's just the first day or 30th and the first day. Someone may say, well, you can't do that. You have to have just one seventh day. Find me the scripture that says I can't. There's even a scripture I produced for you in Luke chapter 6 where it says on the second Sabbath after the first. When's that happen? On the new moon. So these prolonged Sabbaths are not to be confused with working days. The new moon is not to be confused with the working day. You can see there are 6 working days. We never violate the 6 working days. That is the positive commandment. We never violate the 6 working days. Okay, so anybody who says lunar Sabbatarians violate the 6 working days, that's it. That's nonsense. You don't even understand the position. Okay, you're just like, you don't want to study hard enough? And if you don't want to study hard enough, then you will be confused, and then you can live in your confusion because you're not actually accurately representing us. I've debated people for years now. I've been keeping lunar Sabbaths in 2009. Okay? 2009. And I have talked to multiple people who held to the fact that we did things we didn't do. And they were adamant. But guess what? I was one of them once. Before I was convinced of it, before I said, that's the biblical Sabbath, that's what the Bible was explaining, I had the same arguments because I didn't give enough time to study. I was a fool, and I was foolishly arguing a straw man, something I created that wasn't even true. So, you must have the new moon to make this happen in occurrence with the 6th, 7th, and 1st day of the week to be the 14th of the month, the 15th of the month, and the 16th of the month. If not, you'll have some floating Sabbath out there somewhere, like you will see in the Enochian calendar right here, as it was called. There are some major calendars that are being pressed right now. They're all solar-based. They have no place for the moon, really. There's a few that sort of kind of try to smuggle it in there, but they never usually get it right. They just kind of like, hey, we need a place for the moon and the stars because we want to have that Genesis 1:14 claim. But they really don't have it because they make up some really odd rules. None of it comes from the Bible. It comes from pseudepigraphal books. It comes from Book of Enoch, Book of Jubilee, Dead Sea Scrolls, and that sort of stuff. Okay, which has no place in the Bible unless you are Ethiopian or something. So, so let's go back to this second answer real quick. We'll read through it again. The Sabbath, as remembered by the new moon, aligns the natural correspondence of the 14th at evening, 14th and evening, right? And this is going to happen every month. It's not going to be Passover every month, but this is going to happen every month in the same order. Every month will look like this. I hope people who had listened to this 2 or 3 weeks ago now went out and looked at the moon that evening and have been doing it because it's Sunday. We're on Sunday, which is the traditional normal church meeting day, right? The Christian meeting day. If you go out and look at the moon, we're going to see this same pattern in the heavens next month too, but we won't be on Sunday anymore. Something to think about. The Sabbath is remembered by the new moon aligns the natural correspondence of the 14th at even, followed by the 15th day of the first month. This is only dealing with the first month, which is commanded as a day of holy convocation, no servile labor in the keeping of the day of Yahweh's Passover, and of the first day after that evening to be remembered, the festival of unleavened bread, that's the 15th, which by the ending of this week is as well the ending of the week of unleavened bread, commanded on the 21st day at evening, allowing for the holy convocation and the day of no servile labor to as well correspond with the 22nd day as the weekly Sabbath for the third week of the month. And the same pattern is found with varied language concerning the Feast of Tabernacles. And so the point being made here with the Feast of Tabernacles is one law says 14th at evening, the 15th day is unleavened bread. Tabernacles law doesn't talk about evening time. It doesn't say the 14th at evening. It's implied. You have to imply it. There's always a 14th at evening. But it just says the 22nd day of the month and the 15th day of the month. Whereas Passover uses varied language. Okay? That's good. Some people say, why doesn't it just say the same thing the same way every time? Why? Because this is called triangulation. If you want to find out an answer, you need 3 points of reference. Right? If you want to come up with a conclusion and know you got the right answer, you want 3 points of reference. 2 points of reference just makes a straight line. 3 points of reference, you can actually triangulate something and center in on it. You can actually understand the meaning of something if it's said 3 different ways, because 3 different ways will allow you to think from 3 different angles. And that's the reason why I believe it speaks this way. The day of the wave sheaf, we're on answer 3 now. The day of the wave of the sheaf, called the Feast of Weeks, is a festival which is specifically commanded to contain both 7 times 7 weeks, so 7 weeks, as well as 50 days in its counting. The day following the ending of the 50th day, according to the keeping of the lunar weeks, from the morrow after the first week Sabbath of the month. Now this is looking at Leviticus 23 in order to keep up with what this is talking about. You'd have to be looking at this from Leviticus 23, which is the 8th day of the first month, aligns the 50th day and the 7 weeks passage to occur directly before or at the time of the last Sabbath of the second month in conjunction with the third new moon of the year. That's complicated, isn't it? So let's see if we can make that a little easier. Try to get rid of this. We're going to be done with this. Wish it didn't take so long to erase this. All right. Here's what's being stated. Whenever we count Pentecost, which is one of our number one arguments, and I will admit there are multiple ways to count Pentecost in every calendar system. It's the most complicated subject. I can only tell you how I believe it works. I can tell you how other people do it, but I can only tell you why I agree with the method I agree with. When we look at Pentecost, Pentecost means 50 days, right? So, Pent means 50, right? Means to count. So it's literally the 50 count. And when we talk about Pentecost, what this is telling us is if we started counting after the 8th day of the first month, which is a Sabbath, it's always going to be a Sabbath. Remember, 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th, they're always Sabbaths. Every single month, all 12 or 13 months of the year, every single time, always going to be Sabbaths. They will never change. Always be the same. So when we're dealing with the first month, which is called Abib, right? This is the first. And I'm going to spell month like this. With a little double O looking deal there. See? It's like, you like that? I like that. Okay? I like to be corny like that. It's called Abib. Abib literally means green ears of barley. It literally means green barley. You can look it up in your Strong's Concordance, and as you find the word Abib, you will notice it's always talking about the green ears of barley, which is referring to the wave sheaf. So, when we're dealing with the first of the month, we have to ask ourselves the question, when does the count of Pentecost begin? Does it start at the beginning of Abib? Does it start after that? Well, when's it going to start? Well, what we do know, historically speaking, is that the wave sheaf always took place on the 16th day of the month. Josephus and Philo both confirm that. They're the only writers of the day that actually give us the monthly date. They say it was always waved on the 16th of the month. I don't have the reference in front of me. I can pull it up. If anybody wants it, ask me. I'll give it to you. You can probably look through my notes or look through the search bar on the Renewed Covenant Ministry website. You'll find it, because I've quoted it several times. In order to have all of this work out, knowing that we have to have that 16th as the day for a wave sheaf, right? But then we also have Pentecost that has to come out during the time that the grain is mature, which wheat matures after barley. The wave sheaf is a barley. Pentecost, though, is wheat. And if you read in the scriptures, you'll see that it is the first fruits of wheat harvest. Okay? So, this is what's being celebrated here, but the wave sheaf is celebrating barley. A bib refers to barley. That's the first day of the year. Okay? We start our count. Here's how we do it. From the 8th Sabbath, the 8th day Sabbath, the day after, because the scripture says the morrow after the Sabbath, but it doesn't tell you which one. So you have to, once again, triangulate things in order to come up with an answer. So, here we are. This would be a Sabbath day. It would also be the what? The first Sabbath. This would be the first weekly Sabbath of the year. So new moon is technically the first Sabbath in the month, but it's not the first week. So here we are. So we would start our count on the 9th. This gives us 1 week. This would be a first day of the week, right? This is a first day of the week. It's a working day, right? Why is that important? Why is it important that this day be the first working day? Anybody got an answer? What do you have to do? You have to take a cutting of the sheaf, right? So they're going to take this sheaf, and that it has to be in Jerusalem by the 16th to be waved by the priests. So you've got a week from here to walk to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. Because remember, this is the day after the first day of unleavened bread. So you have Passover being celebrated, the Sabbath being celebrated, and then this is going to be the first Sabbath which they offer. It'll be 1 week exactly. Once you continue doing so this is just 1 week, right? This is 1 week, 1 full week. From here to here, okay? It's just 1 full week. And then after that, you have to times that by 6 weeks to get to here. This is going to bring you, right here, to the 28th at evening of the second month. That 50th day is going to occur right around here. And then immediately after the 28th, what happens? Well, look at your new moon sheet for me. Let's pretend that this last Sabbath right here that says 29, underneath of it, you see how it says 7 and 29, and it's part of that Sabbath? Does everybody see that? This 6th day says 28. That's right here. So if this were the second month, and this were the third month in the diagram, then immediately following this is going to be a Sabbath, and then a new moon period. It doesn't matter how long it is. And that will be the Feast of Weeks. 7 Sabbaths complete, which is what it's also called in Scripture. Okay? So that means that we're going to have a what? What is Pentecost? What is it?
First fruits.
First fruits, but what is it? What's the general term for it? What kind of thing is it? It's a chag. It's also a moed, though. It's both. Because it starts on a Sabbath at evening, and it ends with a Sabbath of the new moon, but the whole period of time is called a chag. So, Pentecost, how we can observe Pentecost is just like you're going to see here. You've got your 7th day Sabbath. It's your 29th some years, or sometimes we're going to have a 30th day in there, right? And sometimes we're going to have a first. Sometimes we have no 30th, we just have a first. This whole time period is called a what? From here to here? What is it?
Sure.
A chag. Right? This is a Sabbath. It's an appointed feast. It's a moedim. The new moon is a feast. It's a moedim. It's an appointed time. But from here to here, both of these and whatever's in the middle of it is all festival chag. And in this particular case, if this were the second month, right? That means this day is second month, this day is second month, but this day is third month. Put my other phone in there so you know. See that? Right? And this whole time is going to be called Pentecost. This is going to be the whole feast of what? Feast
First
of Weeks. Why is it called the Feast of Weeks? Sabbath. Or some people say Sabbath.
the 7 Sabbaths.
7 Sabbaths have been completed. And the end of the new moon ends the 7th Sabbath. Because this is one Sabbath, counted as one Sabbath. 7 Sabbaths complete. And it doesn't finish until you get to the end of that rest period. And then you go back to work, and you're going to start again to, working day number 1, working day number 2, working day number 3, and you're offset again. You understand? So that helps explain Pentecost, and I will be honest with you, Pentecost is a confusing thing to explain. I'm going to save the next question, number 4, the next question and answer. I'm going to do that. 18, Roman numeral 18, which is XVIII. I'm going to save that for next week. So we're going to do 4 now. Answer 4, page 9. As well, the 7th new moon is called the first day of the 7th month, so that's absolute. But it's also called Sabbath. Is that which has a specific wording of being called this new moon a Sabbath, Leviticus 23:24, which says, in the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall you have a Sabbath, a memorial of the blowing of the trumpet, a holy convocation, you shall do no servile work. So here's what we're pointing out here. We have covered Pentecost, the 50 count. We have covered Feast of Weeks. It is a new moon festival. It's a new moon appointed time. It is naturally going to happen in the new moon period. It does not break the order of your regular days off. So ancient Israel, because they always kept the new moon, because they always kept the weekly Sabbath alignment with the moon, it was the same as it was every month. There was nothing special about it. It wasn't like, we're just, and when I say that, I mean the timing wasn't special. There was something special because liturgically speaking, liturgy means your public work, literally. That's what the word liturgy means. And their liturgical use of it was, it's unleavened bread, it's Passover. We have a special devotion memorial being devoted at this time. And what you'll find in the Bible is that's the pattern that's always used. Pentecost is a new moon festival. Okay? It is a time of new moon. And you want to know something that's really interesting? And there's a Bible study, I think it's just written. I don't think I ever preached on it, directly, or taught on it directly that I have recorded. But the sacrifices on Pentecost are the same as the new moon sacrifices commanded in Numbers chapter 28 and 29. The same exact animals, the same exact things. What's that go to prove or help prove? What evidence is that? That it's a new moon festival. So these are all proofs that add up that this should be kept. So if you're keeping the count of 7 weeks from any other time, if you're using a Saturday and saying, well, that's the Sabbath, or a Sunday and saying, well, that's the first day, or however you're doing it, or if you're keeping your count from Passover like some Jewish sects do, you'll have that 7 Sabbaths complete happening in the middle of a work week. How does that make any sense? Right? Or you'll go like the Anglicans, the Catholics, and people like that do. They'll say, well, no, it's the closest Sabbath to Passover that we're going to choose to keep Pentecost. Okay? As they look at that and they consider that, they have to then make sense of it because they want a perfect 49 days plus 1 equals 50. That's what they want. They want it to look like that, what they're used to. So what they do is they say, we're going to grab the first Sabbath, the first Saturday, that's near Passover, or the one that happens within the week of Passover, because you know you have a whole week of unleavened bread. And they're using a lunar Sabbath for their first day and their ending days. So they're still using the 15th and the 22nd as their feast days, right? The 14th at evening and the 21st at evening. They're still doing that. But because they're not keeping it in alignment with the moon, they have this other 7-day rotation. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. You know, that's the other rotation they're using. They go, well, we're going to pick the Saturday that's in the middle of the feast, or wherever it happens, and we're going to count that 7 times. And wherever that lands, that's what we're going to call Pentecost. And that's probably the most popular Western way of doing it. In other words, Anglicans, Roman Catholics do it that way. Not all Jews agree with that. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them, like I said, they count from Passover. They count from the 16th day after unleavened bread, and that gets them in the middle of the week somewhere. And it's just a day all to itself. It's not counting a 7th week of anything other than just 7 rotations. So why do I agree with our position the best, before I move on to the Feast of Trumpets or Memorial of Trumpets, is because it triangulates everything. Agriculture works with it. Historical references of Josephus and Philo work with it. And as well as the natural witness of the heavens works with it. It's actually part of the lunar cycle. It happens right before the Sabbath evening of the 2nd month. And yes, it has to do that. It has to work with that system somehow. It has to be agricultural. It has to be numbered. And it has to be named. That's what it has to be. So agriculturally speaking, you could actually harvest wheat at that time, and you do actually. I've done it with my own hands. We've actually made the wave loaves from ripe wheat to celebrate the festival. That's taken right out of the grain fields. And as long as you're doing that where you align a bib with your local agriculture, you can do it. If you're trying to keep it based on some other country's agriculture, that won't work. Is there any questions on Pentecost before we move on? I was kind of rushing to get to 4, but I should take time for you guys rather than just try to get through the information. So is there anything that we can talk about on Pentecost before moving on to trumpets? And how that works with the regular weekly Sabbath and the new moons? Good? Any thoughts? You look like you want to say something.
I was just thinking about like the correspondence to Jubilee and stuff like that.
We're going to leave that off for.
Okay.
We're not going to talk about the yearly Sabbaths at this time. So.
Too complex.
Well, it's just too much to try to handle all at once. I mean, other than to say that the pattern remains the same.
Right. That's all I was mentioning.
All right, I'm wiping it off. We're going to move on. Is this being helpful to everybody? Is there some help for some of you guys that are newer to this stuff? No? Silence is consent. I guess I can take it that way. Numbers chapter 30.
Sure, I think this is good for people.
Is this helping you?
Can I take this one?
Absolutely. You can take them all.
No, just because then I have a visual to use when somebody asks questions about them.
Take them all and
Like 3-day Sabbath, how is that the 7th day? How you working 6 days? Though you've got a visual to work with, it makes it easier to explain.
good. I'm very happy to hear that. So Pentecost is a new moon. Chag. Pentecost is a new moon, and the new moon is an appointed time. Now we're moving on to 4, the next new moon festival. 4, as well, the 7th new moon is called the first day of the 7th month. So if you're reading Leviticus 23, 24, you'll be reading these words. Is that which has the specific wording of calling the new moon a Sabbath, Leviticus 23, 24, which says, in the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall you have a Sabbath, specifically called a Sabbath, a memorial blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation, you shall do no servile work. As described in the first point of this answer, so it is in this 4th point. So if you went back and looked at the first answer, concerning the 7th month, the new moon feast of trumpets is the first day of the 7th month, which is being followed by the 4th commandment, intervals of 6 working days, 6 days thou shalt work. So what are we talking about? We're talking about this diagram one more time. This places the month's 2nd week Sabbath to occur the 15th day of the months. We're talking about Tabernacles now, which is the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, as well the last and the 8th day in counting the total days of the Feast of Tabernacles will as well occur on the regular 3rd week Sabbath of the month. So the 3rd week of the month, right? Always the same. It's always the 22nd day. The 2nd week of the month Sabbath is always on the 15th. That can only happen if the first day is a new moon Sabbath. Once again. So there's our points being made again. On the 7th month this time, not on the 1st month. The last discussion we had was about the 1st month. The next one was about Pentecost. Now we're dealing with 7th month, which is trumpets and tabernacles. The 15th day of the month, which is the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, as well as the last 8th day in the count, because it calls it an 8th day count in the scripture. It will as well occur on the regular 3rd week Sabbath of the month, the 22nd day of the month. Both the 15th and the 22nd are specifically commanded to be holy convocations, a day of no servile labor, as well as a Sabbath. Okay? We're going to save atonement for next week, which is 18. So you can abandon your catechism at this point other than looking at this. What are we talking about? Well, you can look at this paper here, but I'm going to draw it out for you and I'm going to write it out for you to make sense of it. We are talking now about the 7th. It's a little long. The 7th month. That's right. Right? The 7th month. The first day, according to Leviticus 23, 24, 23, 24, the first day is what? What day? What is it?
Sabbath.
It's a Sabbath.
New moon.
It's a new moon. But what special new moon is it? What's it called? What's the first day of the 7th month's new moon called? What's its name? Huh? Trumpets. All right. So the first day, we're going to make categories here. Of the 7th month is going to be a new moon. Right? We know that. We know that's going to be the case. We know that it is going to be a Sabbath, because it said it's a Sabbath. It's going to be a memorial, okay, which is equivalent to a remembrance. Okay, you can see the word memorial, remembrance in there. Remembrance, memorial. And it is called trumpets in our King James. I like to call it trumps, because technically teruah, the word teruah, means to trump. It's the sound the trumpet makes. It's not actually the object. So, this is a trumpet. That was a bad trump, okay? So, and I'm not talking about the president at all. So, the trump is the sound. It literally is called a time of shouting sometimes. So it's actually the shout of the trumpet. So it's literally the trump more than the trumpets. But we call it the memorial Now that is important. Of trumpets. It's actually called the day of the memorial of trumpets. So, why is that important for us to know? Well, in order to understand why that's important, you have to understand that we already covered Numbers 10:10, which already said every single month you're to blow a trumpet. Now, you will commonly come to this conclusion, and I've covered this before, I'm going to do it again because I need to be very redundant about this. People will always say, why did God have to go out of his way to say that the new moon was a Sabbath on the 7th month if it's always a Sabbath on a new moon? That's ridiculous. Well, Numbers 10:10 says you're to blow a trumpet every new moon, but yet this is called the memorial of trumpets. So it's a memorial. Why is it a memorial? Because the new moon's always sabbatical. As well, the new moon always has a trumpet. So what is its purpose? Here's its purpose. It's the 7th. What's special about the number 7? It's the Sabbath number. So it's like the 7 of the 7s of the 7s of the 7s of the 7s of the 7s. That's what it is. It's magnifying the number 7. It's saying this is the 7th new moon, and it's a memorial to remind you to always blow the trumpet every new moon. And if you think Israel would forget to do that, you're right, because they did. And that's why we don't do it today. We do have, interestingly enough, church bells still. You know, they're still kind of church bells for a memorial. And so this memorial was to remind us of why we did this. And this was to keep us in line, to say the 7th, the Sabbath number, is to teach us that this 7th month is the pattern of how to do things. And if you keep up with that liturgy, if that is your liturgical remembrance, you'll never forget it. It's only once you forget it and you say, I don't need to do that anymore. The law's been done away with. I don't really need that kind of stuff anymore. I don't really need any type of liturgy. I don't need a calendar to teach me how to worship God. I mean, it's spirit and truth now. It's, it's just kind of, it's spiritual. Just kind of feel it. I don't need that stuff. Well, it's once you go there that you forget how to worship God properly. And so Scripture gave us these very specific times of worship in the law of God that Israel was to remember. And you know what's interesting? Jeroboam, when Jeroboam broke God's law, he changed the 7th month to the 8th month. That's all he did. 1 month ahead. That's it. It was still on the 15th day. It was still for 8 days. It was still a feast of 8 days. But all he did is he actually changed out the 7th to the 8th. And the Bible condemns him as being one of the most wicked kings in Israel. And then on top of that, he invented his own priesthood and his own ways of worship. And he just kind of kept compounding his innovations. Why was that so damaging? Because it doesn't take long once you start that to eventually become a Roman Catholic. That's why. Eventually you just make stuff up and say that's our tradition and this is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. We received it from our fathers, from our traditional fathers of the faith, of the church. Okay? So, in ending with this, it's a new moon. It's a Sabbath. It's a memorial. That corresponds back to the memorial already being told for us to remember in Numbers 10. This goes also back to it's a chag, it's a festival time, right? Which goes to what psalm? Psalm 81. The new moon psalm. Blow trumpet in the moon. You know? That one. So you can see all of these things here. All of these things here are lining up. So if the first day is a Sabbath, here we are again. We're back to it. If the first day is a Sabbath, you can look at either side of your paper now, as long as you're looking at this second calendar. If the first day is a Sabbath, that means your first week is going to be... What day is the Sabbath going to be on? What's this first weekly Sabbath number?
8th.
8th. What's the second? So this is first week. it gonna be?
15,
Second week?
22nd,
Don't put a K in there. What's it gonna be?
22nd.
15th? And there you go, Sabbath again. Third?
22nd.
What is it?
22nd.
22nd. This is our third week. Okay? All of these are Sabbaths. I'm just using this little thing here. I could put sevens, right? Seventh days. So, Sabbath. Seventh day again, Sabbath. Seventh day again, Sabbath. Seventh day again, Sabbath. But this Sabbath here is going to be called the Feast of what?
Saturday.
Tabernacles. Feast of Tabernacles. Booths, some people call it. Feast of Booths. Feast of Tabernacles. Tents. Right? So now we have another liturgical remembrance that's happening, but it's happening in accordance with the same exact weekly celebration. The same feast that was always ordained for the seventh day, but now we on the seventh one, God says, I have this special one. It's also called the Feast of what?
Ingathering.
Sukkot.
What is it?
Ingathering.
Oh, he's
Yes. Some people call it Sukkot or Sukkah. It's the Hebrew word. Some people just put a T on it. I like the TH. I'm big on those old English Germanic ways of speaking Hebrew. I'm not real big on that stuff. I don't like it as much. I stick with this King James. You know, it's interesting. It's like, this is how we're going to pronounce this, and then you get like, 200 years down the line and people are hawkering while saying the same words. Like, what happened there? I don't know. So anyway, I like the non-hawker pronunciations. 15th, 22nd. I'm trying to keep it lively, joking a little bit with you. But I could be dry, as everybody imagines I am. So you have Feast of Ingathering. What reference is this? What's Ingathering refer to? Agriculture. What symbolic name does it have? The answer's in front of you. Speak up, you getting tired?
Yeah, 10.
Speak it, read it. Tabernacles, booths, tents. So here's the symbol. Here's the agriculture. And what's the number? It's called the Feast of the Seventh Month. 3 again, triangulation. So the agriculture has to work with it, the symbols have to work with it, and the number works with it. Once again, this is going to be the second Sabbath of the week. This is going to be the third Sabbath of the week. And once again, we have fallen right into the pattern. And of course, by necessity, the next Sabbath is going to be the 29th. And then we're back to what? And this will be the 8th. Amen. So, there we are with that. Now, take a look at your paper. I'm gonna end off with this. We'll end off with this. Take a look at this festival. So this is called the Enochian, Zadokite, Jubilee, Dead Sea, Qumran calendar. And there's probably a few other names out there for it. Essenian, I think, is another one. And interesting enough, when I first started studying the feasts and I attempted to keep some festivals myself, I kept them according to a solar calendar because the minister that I listened to at the time, who was encouraging Christians to keep the feasts, taught a solar calendar. And so I just fell in line and said, okay, I'll follow this guy's advice. And it took me a while to study my way out of it, but it was a few years. And I followed a calendar very similar to this. So I can talk about this a little bit. You can see in this, I'll just bring it up on my computer and you guys can look along. That way I don't have to put my glasses on. look at why I say that this is a problem. Okay, look at the first diagram. Can you see it? Do you see how this person has first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and Sabbath? Those are the days of the week. But then they have the calendar numbered months. You see that? Passover is the 14th on Abib, and 15th is the first day of unleavened bread. Do you notice how that is commanded to be a Sabbath in Leviticus 23, Exodus 12, Exodus 16, Exodus, was it 30? Anyway, I can't remember what 23 is the other one. Deuteronomy 16 and all those places, right? We got these commands and dates given to us. That happens right smack dab in the middle of right in the middle. On the fourth day. So this calendar says there has to be 3 Sabbaths in 1 week. And quite frankly, a lot of people do this. The Jews to this day who keep Saturday do the same exact thing. Saturday is what they say the Sabbath of the week is, but then they have during the feast week, they'll have the first day of unleavened bread. Right? And so then they have the last day of unleavened bread. You got to contend with it. And both are commanded Sabbaths by God. God commanded them, but they don't work with their weeks because they don't use the new moon to balance out Sabbaths. They don't allow the moon to be for seasons. Psalm 104:19. They don't allow that to happen. So this is what I wrote, my friend. Here's the problem. These are commanded Sabbaths and holy convocations from Leviticus 23. Et al. Et al. Is Latin for altogether, basically. It's legal terminology. Yet, here are your weekly Sabbaths. This means during the feasts, there are 3 Sabbaths, or 3 seventh days. Remember that as a synonym. In 1 week. How's that happen? And they're not connected. It's not like it's one big long Sabbath. You got work days in there too. So then the commandment says 6 days shalt thou work. But that week you only get to work 3. Or only get to work 5. Because you got an extra Sabbath in there you got to deal with. So right in the middle of the week it's interrupted. Sabbatically. Same thing is going to happen once again on the 7th. Now the 4th month is just thrown in there as like the oddball month. Because nothing special happens on the 4th month festively. And you'll notice Sabbaths are still on the Sabbath, which they're saying is the 4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th. Okay? That's what they're trying to say. The problem is all you have to do is go over to our calendar on the other side and look at how nice and neat those lines are. Isn't that nice? The Sabbaths of the week are the Sabbaths of the feasts. And they're right out of the Bible. You just read them out of Scripture. You don't have to come up with this day is the 7th day of the week, and which day is it? I don't know, because you can't really tell. You just got to kind of pick one. How do you know, naturally, what the 7th day of the week is? Is there any way to know what the 7th day of the week is by nature? Without the moon, no. Because there's no other light in heaven that follows a 7-day pattern. Only the moon. And the moon uses quarterly phases based on the new moon. So our pattern is always going to line you back up like this. Okay? It will look like the 7th month or the 1st month every month. And then some months we have special devoted times, liturgies. We have Passover, which of course we're Christians, right? Real Christians. And we devote all of Passover to Christ first, and secondly the memorial of leaving Egypt second. Because we're Christians first and foremost. And that always was the shadow of Christ's deliverance of sin. Right? Passover was always symbolic of delivering Israel from sin bondage. And if you remember, whenever you read that Deuteronomy chapter 5, 10 Commandments, what's it say? It says, because the Lord delivered you. That's why you keep the Sabbath. So, God of creation and God of salvation. He is once again glorified through this keeping of the festivals this way. So here's what I wrote my friend. These are commanded Sabbaths, 7th days, and holy convocation, Leviticus et al., same exact statement. The weekly 7th days and feast Sabbaths are the same. Every new moon is holy, but the 7th new moon is a holy memorial. If you look at it, atonement's dealt with. I would encourage you to read that now. So next week when we talk about atonement as a special Sabbath and how that works and how it's different, you'll see that. But I want you to notice 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th, always a Sabbath. 4th month, oddball month, nothing special going on. What's the Sabbath days? 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th. 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th. The first month is liturgically to remember Passover and unleavened bread. The 7th month is to liturgically remember Tabernacles, which is a time where we remember the flesh of Christ tabernacling among us, and we remember all kinds of remembrances pertaining to that. Right? This is what we are to remember. We're to remember that we tabernacle in our flesh. And there's many things that we can tie into that. So I'm hoping that this helps you see why the lunar Sabbath, as we call it, as people have come to call it, which really should just be the Sabbath, but the lunar Sabbath, as it's come to be called, is the Israelite Sabbath. It is the original ancient Sabbath. And beautifully, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters a speech, night unto night shows his knowledge. There is no voice nor language where his word is not heard. His line has gone out through all the earth, and his words to the end of the world. I mean, I keep going, but that just makes the point. The point is that in the heavens is the glory of God being shown to us, and it is a timepiece for us to consider. It's Israel's timepiece. There's a very kind of meaningful, important thing I'm going to end with here. When you consider that nature witnesses to Israel's calendar, and Israel's calendar witnesses to nature, it kind of tells you who the dominion of the world is given to. God's people. Right? Because nature is the sign. He says, here's the Sabbath. It's a sign between me and you throughout your generations, right? Exodus chapter 31. We covered that last week too. What's the sign? The Sabbath is the sign. Well, if the Sabbath is based on the moon makes signs. Seasons, days, and years. It all works together into one consistent, beautiful whole. And so that's kind of why I'm going out of my way to explain these things, because I think it's important to understand. You know, Isaiah 66 tells us that when the kingdom is restored once again and Christ rules on his throne, it literally says that all flesh will appear before Yahweh on the Sabbaths and the new moon. And it even says those who will not do it, you'll see their dead carcasses laying on the ground. In other words, God's not going to tolerate Sabbath breaking, new moon breaking. He's not going to tolerate it. When he finally ushers in his kingdom, when the resurrection happens, when all those things come to fruition, Isaiah 66 is a reality. It's not just a cool verse in the Bible, right? It's going to be a fearful and dreadful thing when God commands things like that. So one of the reasons this is good to remember is because the God who ordains the heavens in the law of the heavens, who gives the ordinances of the sun and the moon and the stars, is the God who commands Israel to keep these festivals based on the sun, the moon, and the stars. It all works together into one beautiful whole. Anybody have anything they want to ask, comment, or say? No? Okay. Well, I am hoping that our sound and everything has worked good today, and that our visuals are getting a little bit better. And I'm hoping that we're able to learn something from this time of coming together and studying. So anybody can keep this if they want to, print it off, give it to your friend, help understanding the new moon. This should help thwart a lot of problems people have with our way of worship. This is going to show you how, if you keep any other calendar, and I mean any, and you can, if anybody wants to, they can write me, show me, email me, give me a picture, write it down, whatever, send it to me. There is no other calendar but the lunar Sabbath calendar that allows for this to happen decently and in order, where the Sabbaths of the weeks are the Sabbaths of the feasts, and it doesn't break the law that says 6 days shalt thou work. With one exception, the day God commands fasting, which if anybody has fasted for a day, they know it almost feels like work by the end, you're worn out. So that kind of makes sense, and we'll talk about that next week. It's the only feast that's out of line. Pentecost is new moon, Trumpets is new moon, first day of Passover, or Unleavened Bread, is full moon, first day of Tabernacles is full moon. And if you want to go into the non-law ordained festivals but are still biblical, Purim, or the Feast of Esther, is once again a full moon festival. So, Passover, going into Unleavened Bread, full moon. Tabernacles, full moon. Pentecost, new moon. Right? Trumpets, new moon. So, those work together. Other than that, we don't have any other festivals. They always work within the lunar cycle. They always work within God's ordained